A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my pleasure, my honor to welcome all the esteemed dignitaries in our celebration of the World Radio Day. New World, New Radio. Evolution, creation, connection is the theme of World Radio Day 2021. And in sync with this, the Radio Festival presents its 4th edition, A New Story, in partnership with UNESCO and All India Radio, and with the support of CEMCA and GAIL, ONGC. And we have important partners as well who are supporting us. They are with us to celebrate. Basically, an initiative of SMART, the Radio Festival, began 4 years back and continues to celebrate in entire fervor, spirit, vigor, and joins all the 3 tiers of broadcasting, that is private, public, and community. This year, definitely we have the pandemic challenge, COVID-19 protocol. Amidst that, TRF is presenting a new story, but the enthusiasm is galore, the spirit is high, the celebrations are on, and indeed a new story is emerged. It is still crafting. And as today we are going to understand more about this story in this new world, because we have luminaries with us in this gathering, in this August gathering. So may I please now invite my esteemed guests to please take their stage. I would request the founder of the Radio Festival, Ms. Archana Kapoor, to please come up on stage. The heart and mind behind the Radio Festival, never say die attitude. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Archana Kapoor. May I now request Professor Madhu Parhar to please come up on the stage, Director CEMCA, Commonwealth Educational Media Center for Asia. May I now request Director UNESCO and the representative for UNESCO New Delhi Cluster Office, Mr. Eric Fault. Please come up on the stage. Welcome. May I now request the Additional Secretary of Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Ms. Neerja Shekhar, to please come up on stage. And now may I please request Ms. Archana Kapoor for her welcome address, please. Thank you.
It gives me real pleasure to welcome all of you to this 4th edition of the Radio Festival. It really feels good to use the word 4th. Can't wait for it to be 10th soon. And as we celebrate the 10th anniversary of the World Radio Day, we are just getting there. I would also like to welcome our esteemed guests on the dais. Mr. Vempati is on his way, and we will welcome him specially when he comes here. But I would like to thank Mrs. Neerja Shekhar, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, to make time for this very important event, where we have all radio enthusiasts, community radio and private radio and the public broadcaster coming together to celebrate the World Radio Day. I would like to thank Professor Madhu Parhar for always being there for the festival, supporting community radios and working with them and deepening the connect between us as a community. I would like to thank Dr. Eric Fault. I know this is not a vote of thanks, but it's coming from my heart. So I can't help but say it, that thank you, Eric, for being there and for making this radio festival happen. I don't think that without your support and your continuous guidance, we would have had the courage to do this year after year. I'm so grateful to this audience who understands that we are in a pandemic, but still, because of their love for radio and because of the love for what they do and what they believe in, they have come here and have not only made this a unique experience by joining us online from Australia, from Malaysia, from Sweden, from various parts, from London. This time, this has been an opportunity to bring in radio enthusiasts for our online sessions from across the globe and to work with you and welcome you here as part of this small, a little bit, smaller physical event. These online and offline words were not in our vocabulary earlier, but now we are getting used to them, and now we have to say physical event and an online event. So as we are growing and as reality is sinking in, new words are also coming into our vocabulary. Despite the community radio being the third tier, it was the enthusiasts that conceived this platform. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Shri Shashi Shekhar Vempati ji, CEO of Prasar Bharati, who has come here and who has been with us in the last 2 editions. So I'll just continue. What I was saying is that despite the community radio being the third tier, it was enthusiasts of this sector that conceived of this platform to break the divisions and silos and bring together all the 3 tiers, the public broadcaster, the private broadcasters, and the community radio. Since we started this festival, it is good to see the World Radio being celebrated across the country and basically by community radios. The festival provides us an opportunity to build a larger community of people connected with radio, and also those who want to work with radio to disseminate messages which are crucial for this country, for the development of the marginalized, and for people, for keeping communities tuned in. Radio is a platform that sustains new talent, new ideas, and also explores how the old seamlessly links connect with the new. This understanding has found reiteration during the period of the pandemic. We are in the pandemic, and I must confess, to host this physical event has been an act of courage and commitment to the cause of radio. This courage came from CEO of Prasar Bharati and his team, who felt that we can still go ahead with the physical event. It was the 29th of January. They told us if we take all precautions, we should do a physical event. I reached out to Mrs. Neerja Shekhar, who endorsed this view and said, I will be there, go along. UNESCO was always there with us in this meeting and during these discussions, and so here we are celebrating the World Radio Day. So a clap for the commitment of the radio enthusiasts. This is a platform of collaboration and connection. We want to move beyond the silos that have been created. So we hope that we will stay connected all through the year, COVID or no COVID. We are here to work together and to bring normalcy to a traumatized world. It was our belief in the radio and our commitment to our audience, our listeners, and our communities that helped us ride out the worst phase of the pandemic. We used it as an opportunity to create awareness amongst our listeners and helped them stay safe. Even the Honorable Minister, Shri Javadekar Saab, commended community radios for their contribution. For some, work from home was an option. But for our radio stations, the work only increased during the pandemic, and the CR sector exceeded their brief by also looking at livelihoods and domestic violence. FM radios played a big role in entertaining people in the dark times. AIR kept all their mics on. Without their constant messaging, there would have been far more casualties, and we all understand that. Now, with the vaccine in place, the role of radio is increasing, because we have to work towards vaccine acceptance and addressing hesitancy, and our role is well laid out. Despite funding issues, each one of us here understands the responsibility we have towards its spread and the need to keep the society healthy. This period of crisis has opened new opportunities, and we must see how we can use technology and new awareness in the masses to make the radio sector more robust, relevant, and viable. Internet and mobile penetration is fueling this fear, but we must understand that Corona is not going away, and we have to keep our communities well aware and act responsibly. We have with us some material here which has been shared with you, and we do hope that you will use this and disseminate these messages, because vaccine is important for all of us. To build a resilient society, we must together overcome this calamity. It also gives me great pleasure to announce in this edition of the Radio Festival that with support of UNESCO and CEMCA, we are announcing a TRF-SDG Radio Fellowship. We would really like Prasar Bharati and MIB to become a part of it, because the funds only permit 4 fellowships, with SDGs becoming the driving force for the next 10 years. I think as many people on board would be welcome. But for this year, we are extending this fellowship only to the CRS volunteers, that is the community radio sector volunteers. It's a 6-month-long mentorship program, and the outcome will be a 2 hours program and radio content on any SDG of their choice, which will start the series of a podcast by community radios on SDGs. I once again would like to thank each one of you for making time, for coming here and making us feel normal and getting back our lives to normal. So thank you so much, and welcome to the new normal, to the new story of TRF 2021 on this 10th World Radio Day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Archana Kapoor. Moving on, I'd like to invite Director UNESCO and Representative for UNESCO New Delhi Cluster Office, Mr. Eric Fault, for the opening address, please. Thank you.
Ms. Nirja Shekhar, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Information and Broadcast. Mr. Shashi Shekhar Vempati, CEO, Prasar Bharati. Ms. Madhu Parrar, Director, CEMCA. And Ms. Archana Kapoor, who's making the Radio Festival go stronger every year. Dear friends, Sabko Mera Namaskar. It is, of course, my pleasure to be with you on this auspicious occasion. We meet again, and what an extraordinary year this has been, with many unforeseen challenges cast upon us and the whole world in the form of this pandemic. I would like to begin by really congratulating very warmly Archana and her team at SPART for being able to organize the 4th edition of the Radio Festival when public gatherings are still a difficult task to accomplish. We sincerely thank also All India Radio for coming on board again and supporting this year's celebration following the successful collaboration that we had last year. We're very confident that this partnership will continue to grow. Archana was mentioning that she can't wait until the 10th anniversary. I hope I'll still be here with you. But it certainly will go a long way in strengthening advocacy and engagement on radio development issues, which is of utmost importance under the given circumstances. We are gathered here today to celebrate radio as a medium of mass communication, which has shown extraordinary resilience in crisis situations and continued to adapt itself despite the advent all the time of new technologies. Over 110 years or so after the invention of radio, it continues to be the information medium with the greatest penetration. That is why it has been a key tool for our responses to crisis situations in general throughout history, and certainly throughout the pandemic. The COVID crisis has impacted every sector of society, in many cases backtracking the gains towards the Sustainable Development Goals. For instance, and that's very important, of course, to UNESCO, let us look at how it has impacted education. According to UNESCO estimates, over 1.2 billion youth and students across the planet have been negatively impacted by the pandemic. Although the immediate response was to go digital, considering the existing technological divide, we have seen that most countries around the world have also used a combination of digital means, either television or radio-based programs, in addition to internet, to implement distance education. But radio has been and has continued to be, by far, the cheapest and most effective mode of education delivery around the world. That is one of the lessons of the pandemic. And in India, I would like to especially laud the efforts of All India Radio for taking the lead in broadcasting educational content. Your staggering reach of 99% across a country as diverse as India through hyper-local programming is, I believe, unparalleled. But we're still learning the lessons from this pandemic. There will be many studies, many publications that will look in more detail, but definitely India was a leader, and it was thanks to the efforts from the top, led also by the government, the Ministry of Education, and relayed through All India Radio and others. A survey from last year, commissioned by the Association of Radio Operators of India, reported how the broadcasting industry witnessed a sudden surge in listenership during the lockdown. The average time spent on radio actually increased by 23%, with over 82% of listeners tuning in. And these are just considering FM radio stations. We don't have yet full statistics for the full spectrum of radio stations. In India, with our ongoing and I think well-established engagement with community radios in response to the COVID crisis, we have seen that the educational broadcasts go far beyond the needs of students alone. They also include issues that are of vast importance in the current times, such as health, but also psychosocial well-being, both of which are vital in supporting the populations affected by the pandemic throughout the country. Most importantly, the role radios play in debunking misinformation is crucial. That is also one of the lessons of the pandemic, especially in these times when accurate information can actually help save lives. We have seen the stories from the ground where community radios have helped people help themselves, promoted poverty alleviation through inclusion and innovation, provided lessons to hundreds of thousands of school children and students during the COVID lockdown, and ensuring, because it is why we're all working, ensuring that no one is left behind. UNESCO's long-standing cooperation with the Commonwealth Educational Media Center for Asia, CEMCA, includes also joint action to promote excellence in community radio development and practice. During the last few months, this cooperation has produced a handbook on best practices of community radio and sustainable development goals, which will be launched a little bit later. And I really want to use this opportunity to thank and congratulate Ms. Madhu Parar and the CEMCA team for their efforts in recording these good practices for community radios. Obviously, we hope that it will inspire many others throughout the country, but not only in India, because this handbook provides an overview of the operations and practices of community radio stations in India, but also Bangladesh and Nepal, and considers how they are integrating the most important themes of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda into their everyday programming. I really invite you to look at this handbook. During its development, we learned that although radio broadcasting is very well established in South Asia, it is important to also point out that there are significant challenges still ahead of us. For instance, just to name a couple, how to overcome the sustainability challenges of community radio, and also when and how to introduce digital community radio broadcasting in the region. Again, just to mention a couple of issues. We at UNESCO are certainly committed to ensuring that radio continues to evolve, connect, and innovate, and overcome the barriers of communication. On this Radio Day, let us all come together in celebrating this spirit of New World, New Radio. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eric Fall. Moving on, I would now request Professor Madhu Parhar, please, Director CEMCA, for her special address. Commonwealth Educational Media Center for Asia, Director Professor Madhu Parhar.
Director UNESCO, Mr. Eric, CEO Prasar Bharati, Mr. Shashi Shekhar, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Information Broadcasting, Mrs. Neeja Shekhar, Ms. Archana Kapoor, we all know the person behind this program, colleagues from UNESCO and CEMCA, and the invited guests. I, on behalf of Commonwealth of Learning and CEMCA, extend a warm welcome to all on this program. Today, 13th of February, is celebrated as the World Radio Day. Goal is to raise among the public and the media the importance of radio and to encourage the decision makers to establish and provide access to information through radio. UNESCO describes radio, and I quote, "Radio is a powerful medium for celebrating humanity in all its diversity and constituting a platform for democratic discourse," unquote. This year, as already Archana has said, it is important because it's the 10th anniversary of the World Radio Day. Coming back to what in India is. In India, radio broadcast began as a private venture way back in 1923-24, when there were 3 radio clubs established in Bombay, now Mumbai, Calcutta, now Kolkata, and Madras, now Chennai. They were broadcasting 2 to 3 hour programs. Mainly it was on music as well as different various talks. Radio quickly spread, transmitting information to broadcasting music and even serving as a means of transmitting stories. With other new medias like the television or the internet, radio stands apart from other media due to its reachability to the rural strata being inexpensive and portable. Has it become obsolete? No. Broadcast India survey shows that television penetration in India is 66%, and this data, of course, is of 2018. Maybe it has increased a little bit. But on the other hand, the radio penetration, the radio AM, broadcast radio, today reaches to a staggering 99% of the Indian population. So what about community radios? The movement started in 2008. This community radio movement, it started in 2008, where NGO in the Andhra district, in one of the districts called Medak in Andhra Pradesh, started broadcasting programs, and literature shows that India's first campus community radio, where it was run by the students, was started at Anna University in Chennai. Before the broadcast started, like in 2008, Government of India, in 2002, approved the policy for the grant of licenses for setting up community radios. Since then, several amendments have been made, policies have come, revised, and government announced in 2019, November, that 118 new community radio stations will be set up or are in the process of setting up. Currently, India has around 280 plus community radio stations, which serve various categories like the farmers, the tribal, the coastal communities, the minorities, and special interest groups. CEMCA since its inception has been closely associated with all aspects in the development of community radio in India. Policy, advocacy, establishment of community radio stations, and capacity building programs for community engagement, station management, as well as the local content creation. We are working closely with Ministry of Information Broadcasting. I'll just highlight 2 experiments which we did very recently with community radio station. One was with the Department of Science and Technology, and another one was with Ministry of Ayush. With Department of Science and Technology, government has developed, the draft has come on a new policy on science, innovation, and technology, 2020. So CEMCA broadcasted the program of 25 radio stations, through 25 radio stations, and it reached 12,000 community people in rural area. We got the data and we have provided it to the Department of Science and Technology that what people think, what innovations should be done in education, health, and agriculture. Very recently, which the broadcast has ended on the 10th of February, that was from the Ministry of Ayush, which was on immunization campaign due to this pandemic. The data we are still to be analyzed, but we tried our level best that it was just not listening. After listening to the broadcast, the community became the learners. How to use the various alternative medicines to build up the immunity. Now, last point. According to the joint work plan, which Eric just mentioned, between UNESCO and Commonwealth of Learning, CEMCA, CEMCA was directed to compile the best practices in community radio stations for sustainable development. Keeping in mind the outcome, that is accessibility to reach sustainable development goals using community radio. Today on the World Radio Day, we are releasing the publication, Best Practices of Community Radio and Sustainable Development Goals, a handbook. It is a joint publication of UNESCO New Delhi and CEMCA. Before we do the launch or the release, I'll just mention a few points about the handbook. The best practices in this handbook are from 3 countries, Bangladesh, India, and Nepal. It contains 56 stories, 5 stories from Bangladesh, 42 from India, and 9 from Nepal, covering 15 sustainable development goals out of 17. There are no stories on industry, innovation, and infrastructure, that is goal 9, and partnership, that is goal 17. Maybe we need to emphasize, and the community radio stations have to broadcast some programs under these 2 goals. Maximum number of stories, that is 26, were from the goal 3, that is good health and well-being. And that's what the interpretation is, that health is the top priority of each one of us, which was followed by quality education, 11 stories, and climate change, climate action, 9 stories. Again, another 2 very important themes or the focus areas, what people need across Asia, and especially these 3 countries. And as I said, this is the priority of the broadcast of the community radio stations. Each best practice published is a story of the community radio station. The stories in this handbook will inspire all other stations, as there are 280 plus community radio stations in India, and of course in Bangladesh there are more, and in Nepal. Through this publication, I'm sure community radio stations, they got a voice. Reading these best practices, community radio stations will help improve their own efficiency. It will help leverage someone else to improve their own challenge areas and stimulate innovation and growth. With this, I request that we release the handbook now. Thank you. Lastly, I express my gratitude to Hezekiah Chief of the Communication and Information, UNESCO New Delhi, and his team, especially Ashita Singh, for providing support and forbearance in finalizing the handbook. I sincerely appreciate the editorial team members from UNESCO Office of Bangladesh, India and Nepal, and other members from India for reviewing its suitability. Thanks to all community radio stations who contributed to this handbook from all the 3 countries. It was a difficult time. It was a lockdown time. Sincere thanks to Mrs. Rukmani for coordination with community radio stations and finalizing the stories. Last but not the least, my CEMCA team for the efforts put in, especially Monica Sharma for handling the project. I'm sure UNESCO and CEMCA will again join hands and work together for prosperous future and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you for attending our humble book launch today. Your presence means a lot to all of us. And a special thanks to Mrs. Neerja Shekhar and Mr. Shashi Shekhar, CEO of Prasar Bharati. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Madhu Parhar. Moving on, now we have the inaugural address. For that, may I request Ms. Neerja Shekhar, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, please.
Good morning to all of you. Mr. Shashi Shekhar Vempati, the CEO of the public broadcaster in India, Prasar Bharati, Mr. Eric Falt, Director UNESCO in India, Professor Madhu Parhar, CEMCA. We have been partnering with her in many ways and in the future too. Ms. Archana Kapoor, whom I met many, many years back in Mewat, and that's the first community radio I had ever visited. The association is long, and I'm extremely honored to be a part of the radio festival here today. And as we celebrate the World Radio Day with evolution, innovation, connection for the new world and the new radio. It's great that we are doing it in a hybrid manner. I was telling Ms. Kapoor that we just celebrated the 51st International Film Festival of India in Goa in a hybrid format, which means the opening and the closing were physical. The opening of the few sections like Indian Panorama or the foreign country of focus partner were physical, but most of the screenings, the master classes, the in-conversation classes, they were virtual. So we had, thankfully, we were able to ensure with all the COVID protocols in place that there were no problems thereafter and everybody went back healthy as they were. Radio is a fascinating sector. With All India Radio, the public broadcaster, which has reached all parts of the country almost. The little bit that is left will be there very soon. The community radio stations and the private FM radios, these are the radios in the formal sector, and we are very glad that the framework that we've all put in together to help the sector grow has been working well. Every time one new community radio station gets operational, we get very happy about it. And Mr. Kesarwani, you know him, he's the additional director handling community radio stations, and he'll say, ma'am, there's one more. So today there are 316 community radio stations. Just a few days back there were 315, and he would happily come and say there's one more that has become operational. That's how we also get involved in the way the sector grows. Radio has a very special role in the media and broadcasting sector. Of all these formats of radio that we have, the public broadcaster, the community, and the private FM, they all connect with the community. But community radio is a very special and democratic radio format in a very special, in a very different manner. Most of you have been a part of community radio scenario in the country. The way all radios reach out to the people, they reach out to during disasters, how they support communities during disasters, and especially how they have worked during the pandemic. It's been phenomenal and adds more credit to the involvement of radio in our lives. Community radios in particular, because they're focused on the community, have been able to address the sustainable development goals in a more meaningful manner, because this community is small that they are targeting and the local needs can be addressed. But we can see that media sector in most countries is not a very perfect place to be, considering that if we look at our we can see that a few owners, media houses, say in single digits, would be owning or would be running a few hundred television channels. And they also run radio, they also run print media, and they also have enormous digital space. And they also are into distribution of media services. So it becomes very critical for the smaller players to survive, to be effective, and we are very proud that the community radios have come up in such a manner that the community is able to associate with them and relate to them in many ways. And thankfully, the lead is taken by the public broadcaster, strong and dependable, which takes the interest of the consumer first and foremost, and also responds to the regional aspirations. So that's why the demand for local language radio has been largely met by All India Radio, and the demand is still growing stronger as we go into languages, as we've covered all the languages in the 7th schedule. We are going for 8th schedule. We are going further to dialects. Maybe there's a demand for, Mr. Vempati will be telling you about it, how the demand for regional dialects, local programming, local news is enormous from different parts of the country. AIR also has been a leader in many ways, that many famous personalities have been associated with it. Sadat Hasan Manto used to write for plays for All India Radio. Pandit Ravi Shankar, Neeraj Chaudhary, the way we started, such a beautiful heritage that we have. In fact, the other day, Mr. Sridhar was telling me about a program he used to do on an Amavasya, where he would talk about, the program he said was named Akash Darshan. He would just ask the listeners to go onto their rooftops and just look at the sky, on a clear sky. He would just relate to them and tell them, this is where you can look at, on this side you're going to see these constellations and planets, and look at this direction, that. So this is so fascinating. It is so fascinating that radio can be a part of our lives in so many ways. Private FM radio has been entertaining urban audiences for long. We intend to go to phase 3 cities now, expand the radio sector, the commercial radio sector. 273 new cities are supposed to be, we are supposed to expand to 273 tier 3 cities, and we hope that this network becomes strong. During COVID, we did by the time we started, the lockdown started, and we did a survey. We shared a questionnaire from the ministry with all the community radio stations, and there were 289 then, at that point of time, last year. And 118 of them responded. We asked them what they were doing during COVID and how they were responding to the community, how many numbers of broadcast they were doing, what was the kind of programming that they were doing. So we got we were very inspired to see that they were totally engaged with this community. They were talking about mental stress. They were talking about, of course, they were talking about COVID. The pandemic had just started then, about mental health programs, about stress management programs. They were doing chat programs on these about yoga, health, and other things. And we started from a time when we were talking about Jaan bhi, Jahan bhi, and now we are talking about Dawai bhi, Kadai bhi. So it's been quite a journey, and radio, recently when we were doing the vaccination campaign was launched, the RJs of private FM radios were trained by the Ministry of Health on how to inform the public about the vaccination drive, how they could talk to people, how they could address the concerns of the people by talking about the vaccination process. And CRS is, I don't know whether CRS has already been trained by the health for talking about vaccination. If they haven't, there has been a demand for it. There have been quite a few developments in the radio sector that that tell us that there's going to be no looking back on radio. There have been podcasts. The Honorable Prime Minister's program of Man Ki Baat has taken radio to new heights. Even Saregama Caravan has, brought radio to the urban audiences in a new manner, a fresh lease of life, as we can say. The emerging technologies of satellite, digital, AI, streaming services are all there, but I feel that radio is going to be there for a long, long time. Many people say television might die a natural death, but I do not believe it. Television has been there. The visual medium and the audio medium are going to be there as long as we are around. So there's no way that radio or television will suffer because of technologies. They will come out in a new manner. They will embrace technology. They will come out in new formats. In fact, when we were discussing visual radio, so Mr. Sridhar was saying, why don't we come out with a nice name for visual radio in the context of India? We have Doordarshan for television. We have Akashvani for radio. So we can have a nice name for visual radio. That's something. So he gave an idea that we could have a competition, look for names, and then see how we can popularize this idea further. Yes, we also need to do a lot of R&D in the radio sector, and I will request the CEO Prasar Bharati to look into this while we are making new schemes about it. R&D, I feel, we'll be doing that R&D on behalf of all of you, and also sharing with you which are the new formats or which are the new things that we can go in for. Beyond news, beyond music, beyond the regular activities that we do. Education through radio has been a very, very enriching experience. All India Radio took the lead through television and also through radio. Initially, you all know because of pandemic, it was online teaching, but then television channels, public broadcasters, television channels took over, and radios took over. Many community radios were involved in teaching through the radio by where local educational institutions requested them for different classes. So this is how radio broadcast has been made more meaningful, more engaging, and more interesting over a period of time. I just hope that the policy framework that we have created with your support, with your help, and with your inputs should enable the radio sector to grow. That's what the purpose of a regulatory framework is. The numbers of community radio is still small. We must see how we can the procedures are very tedious. Takes long to set up a community radio station because they're not commercial entities. Unlike the private radio or All India Radio, which has the government support, community radios have their own limitations, but we are looking at ways how to expand this sector, how to make it easier for the community radios to grow. The commitment remains an inclusive, sustainable society, a country where we all live together and move towards sustainable development goals and meeting them. I hope we work together in this area for all times to come. Thank you very much and wish you the best.
Thank you, Ms. Neerja Shekhar. We would like now to launch the TRF website on this World Radio Day. A round of applause and heartiest congratulations to the team of the Radio Festival on this very auspicious day, the launching of the website. Stay tuned, all of you. As we move on, I would now like to request the CEO, Prasar Bharati, Shri Shashi Shekhar Vempati ji, for the keynote address, please. Sir.
Good morning. My colleague from the ministry, Neerja ji, Mr. Eric from UNESCO, Madhu ji, and Archana ji. This is my second or third year, I guess, with the Radio Festival, and very happy to be a part of it. I always wondered why the World Radio Day was the 13th, one day before Valentine's Day. I guess it is because you can place your requests on radio in advance. So this is my first physical event after the lockdown and whatever has happened with the pandemic. This is the first time I'm actually in the room. We've had too many virtual events. It's good to have a physical event. Radio as a medium, as you know, everyone shared, continues to be very important. I think what is eternal is listening. Listening as a habit is eternal. The modes of listening have been changing. We started with the good old, analog radios. And today it's reached such a stage. Yesterday I got invited to Clubhouse and I'm still trying to figure out how to use it. And it's probably going to take podcasting to a very different level. So, the whole nature of the medium has changed, how you listen to, how you exchange content, and there's continuous innovation. As Neerja ji just mentioned that, we need to continue to do R&D. And this R&D will happen both at the technology level as well as at the content level. We thought podcasting was new. Now I don't know where Clubhouse is going to take this, right? So there's continuous innovation with how content is being created, and so we are in the middle of trials for digital radio. We started off last year. Unfortunately, we got delayed because of the pandemic, but hopefully we'll get back on track this year and complete the digital radio trials so that we can bring digital radio to India in a full-fledged scale. At this point, we have limited digital radio. We have about 25, 30 odd digital radio transmitters, DRM transmitters, which can, where you can, on one frequency, listen to multiple services. So on a trial basis, to create awareness, we are putting some specialized content. India never had a 24/7 news stream for radio. So that we've started on a trial basis. It's available on digital radio. You have one dedicated stream for classical music, AAR Ragam. That's also available on digital radio. And then very specialized content like cricket, for example, because not everyone is interested in cricket. So you can't disrupt the entire day's schedule with a cricket match going on for 5 days. While on digital radio, you can have your own cricket stream without disturbing the other listeners. So these are some of the experiments that are happening with digital radio. A challenge with a country like ours, where there's so much of diversity, so much of geographical expanse, that you can't have a radio transmitter everywhere. And that problem has been solved with satellite radio. With DD Free Dish, we have about 48 radio streams, which can be listened to anywhere in India. And these streams are, combination of content which is relevant to the entire country, like the news stream or Vivid Bharati and so on. as well as very state-specific, language-specific radio streams. And for the first time, we've added our external services. Because until now, external services used to be available only on shortwave. And the peculiarity of shortwave is you can't listen to it in India. You have to be outside India to be able to listen to it. So now we have put it on free dish satellite as well. So you have a world service stream, you have a neighborhood service stream, and so you get the entire bouquet of All India Radio content from the global to the local, all on satellite radio. And the game changer for us was the News on Air app, because what it did is it took radio streams from across India, 200 plus, and put it on one app. So now anywhere in the world you can listen to All India Radio. And I think that's a fantastic innovation for two reasons. One, it gives global visibility to the local content in line with what the Prime Minister has coined, vocal for global, vocal for local. And so you have a platform that, any artist, any presenter from any small town in India now has a platform to be heard and listened to anywhere in the world. So that's a very big game changer. The second thing for us internally within the public broadcaster is it brings a lot of transparency and accountability. Because otherwise it was impossible for us to know what was happening in the 400 radio stations across India. Unless you were physically in that city or that town, there was no way for you to know what was going on air. Now with a flick of a button on the app, we can monitor what is going on, we can get feedback. And with social media, it's a great enabler, because the moment some mistake happens in some radio service somewhere, people immediately tweet and we get to know what is going on. We can verify it for ourselves by listening to it on News on Air. So that way, that brings a lot of transparency and accountability. Like they say, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So just putting out all these radio services on the app brings that attention, that spotlight, and makes it better. So that is a big game changer for us. The other big thing that happened, in fact, during the lockdown, it took pace, was digitizing the archives and making them public. So one of the unique genres of content on All India Radio was the radio drama. And the radio dramas were largely based on celebrated works of literature. And that entire collection in various languages has now been digitized. So thousands of radio plays are now available for listening on demand. So that was one very interesting thing that happened during the lockdown. Similarly, we got writers like Ruskin Bond to read their stories on radio. So that also became very popular during the lockdown. And then one interesting experiment which happens every year is called the Dawn Chorus, where the bird songs are recorded on radio and across continents and are played on one particular day. And this year it was not going to happen because of the COVID, but we ensured that that tradition continues. So we coordinated across our radio stations, especially during the lockdown when there was a lot more natural activity, because human activity was on the downswing. You had birds and animals and a lot of nature becoming alive. So all of those sounds were captured and played on radio. So that was a very unique thing that happened during the lockdown. And I'm also happy to share that AAR Ragam, which is now perhaps the largest repository of Indian classical music, has started making public its oldest recordings going back to the 1940s, 1950s. So starting today on World Radio Day, you're going to get the first Akashvani Sangeet Sammelan recordings from 1950s. And several other classical music recordings that are being made online. So that is starting from today. Similarly, in fact, this is something that has not been made public till date, is the radio autobiographies. Several icons of India have recorded in their own voice their life stories. And those recordings have just been sitting on the shelf. So I have told the archives team that it's time to make them public. So we started off last week with Salim Ali, the Birdman of India, talking about himself on radio. Similarly, there is a number of radio autobiographies which will be digitized and made public in the next few weeks and months. So radio continues to be important, to innovate. And as the Honorable Minister yesterday in Parliament said, that it is also a platform for nurturing young talent And I think that is the goal, mandate of All India Radio. I know several icons of the industry started their careers in radio. Practically everyone in the industry traces their origins to radio. And that will continue only if we continue to make this a platform for younger talent, where the veterans make way for new voices and new artists and so on. So one attempt to ensure that happens, we have now made an online IT-based system by which all the talent that gets an opportunity on All India Radio is tracked across the station. So this is another way of bringing transparency and accountability. So I'm hopeful that AAR will continue to play a very important role, and our local radio stations will continue to engage more closely with the community radios, the community radio community and movement, so that the public broadcasters' infrastructure, the reach is available to the radio community. So once again, my best wishes to all of you for this World Radio Day, and I hope the Radio Festival continues, and congratulations on your website. I just forgot to mention, Madhuji talked about a district, Medak, which happens to be my home district, so that I didn't know about this, so thank you.
Thank you, sir. And with that, I thank all the panelists for such powerful discussion, and useful insights emerged. Significant inputs came across. It will help us to better understand this new world and new radio with new possibilities. Thank you very much.